Oh, Morrowind. Its theme is a surefire way to make me emotional, and I load it up even if I just want to walk around. It's a game so wrapped up in my nostalgia, it took me a full month to write about something that isn't just pure gushing over it. It takes a bit of time to step back and think, you know? Anyways, I started to think about Morrowind, and why I liked it, and that didn't really go well because the answer is a bunch of nostalgic screaming. So instead, I started to think about it in sort of compound terms. What parts really resonate with me, what parts really don't. So I think I've come up with a video that at least says something about Morrowind. So I think that we should just get right into it. The thing that stands out to me most about Morrowind is that it's just such a damn weird world. The game itself is actually really conventional. It's an old-style RPG that takes more from tabletops than it might need to. I mean, seriously, I think the chance to miss mechanic was outdated and frustrating even in 2002. And its story structure is very conventional. It's a bog-standard you are the chosen one story that also puts you in the role of the blank slate tabula rasa nobody. It's a progression we've seen a lot, particularly from Bethesda games. And it is a good progression because it lets you take as much control of the player character as possible and drops you in a story where the people can exposit details as needed. But the standout feature of Morrowind is always going to be its setting. This is the first thing you see when you gain control of the player.
Come with me.
This is where they want you. Head down to the dock and I'll show you to the census office.
The Silt Striders have an astounding look. They are these strange water flea looking things that bellow and call like whales. Also the primary form of travel in Morrowind, and the only form of fast travel till you get your hands on divine intervention scrolls and the like. St. Anine in general is a pretty good opening because you see this wild world beyond and you're stuck in this little area of normality before you go to the rest of this fantastic world. The world of Morrowind also makes you learn about it. It isn't the kind of game you can coast through following objective markers. You're given instructions and keep a journal. You need to read more or less a novel's worth in the course of any one playthrough. You can't just look at the pretty stuff. You need to engage with it on a deeper level. I do miss this from time to time in modern games, but I'm not willing to write off markers either. Morrowind is intentionally trying to get you immersed in the world in a way that requires taking notes. Again, similar to tabletop RPGs. Not every game would benefit from this system, but Morrowind most certainly does. This isn't to say Morrowind is without flaws, it is definitely suffering from age, but I hope it's not exactly controversial to say that that's not a fair criticism. I'm also not great at talking about the game mechanics and how the Ludos and the narrative interact. I leave that to smarter YouTubers. Instead, I just want to voice my biggest criticism of the game so this video isn't just me fawning. There's more than a few wasted chances in writing, things that could be fleshed out maybe. A lot of the quests are just fetches or cookie cutter things, particularly if you join a guild like the Fighters Guild. There's also a lot of space-filling time, mostly because a big chunk of the main quest involves walking through an enemy-filled wasteland and fighting off cliff racers, as opposed to doing things of note. The walking speed being so slow accentuates this, particularly since sprinting through an enemy-filled wasteland isn't really rewarded in this game. Stamina is very important to combat, and sprinting obviously depletes stamina. And I do like a lot of this walking, it just gets tedious after the 15th battle with a cliff racer. The pacing of the game almost feels artificially stretched out, with bursts of excitement between extremely long periods of walking. And it is a beautiful place to walk around in, and I love questing around it, but the sheer amount of time you spend walking can turn me a bit away from the questing. dying while halfway to some location you can only walk to is sometimes enough to make me turn it off for the rest of the day, because I just don't want to deal with that. Alright, now on to the reason I wrote this whole video. Morrowind's extremely weird setting, and the fact that this game is one where every answer must be actively sought out, gives it an extremely strong sense of identity, like it's a world you are in, as opposed to a world that has been made for you. The game benefits massively from the fact you're just some Outlander rando. While I could spend some time interrogating the Elder Scrolls' tendency to make and allow chosen ones who don't come from the land they're saving, unknowns or strangers, or even entirely different from the native races of that area, Morrowind takes it a step further. Much beyond just being a high elf fighting for Skyrim's independence or an Argonian closing Cyrodiil's Oblivion gates, you're a complete stranger to everything Morrowind related. The other two games are full of enough coding that you can look at one or two screenshots and get a general sense of how the world should work. See these castles and you understand it's a Nordic-inspired setting where you'll probably see a lot of references to the Viking culture. And furthermore, you can feel extremely familiar with the world pretty quickly, to the point where you can conceive of your character always having belonged to that land. Morrowind doesn't really have that. It's a total mishmash of cultures, some from pure fantasy, others from reality, with a mix of ideas that really do come together. Imperial structures in their medieval and neo-Roman architecture are next to giant mushrooms. Vivic cantons look like a strange mix of Venetian canals and Mayanish pyramids. And Dwemer ruins look like the ruins of a steampunk civilization. What stands out to me most about Morrowind is all of these still feel properly Morrowind, and they have a strong sense of belonging to some cohesive whole. Even though the aesthetics can shift and change a massive amounts, I can't say that any of the different areas feel like not Morrowind. This is a little difficult to pull off, given we're mixing vast desert with swampy cities, and walking bugs and giant mushrooms with Imperial outposts, but it is pulled off. Of course, plenty of games have different aesthetics and even entirely flip themselves on their ass in terms of what they look like. Hell, one of my favorite tropes in video games is when you go to a new area that looks totally different. So this isn't just about a unique thing Morrowind is doing, but is something I appreciate about it. A lot of the identity that it has is carried through of the persistent feeling of being apart from the world. While the entire game is predicated on the fact that you, an outsider, have to prove yourself to the people of Vardenfell, you don't really reach a point where you're not an outlander to them. Even being a dark elf doesn't escape you from being an outlander. Everything you learn about the world of Morrowind, you learn from others or through observation, and you're not privy to even the most basic information of Morrowind. Even the terminology is weird and often entirely made up. Horror instead of war leader, for example. Morrowind always seems to want to keep something hidden from the incurious player, and even most curious players are going to miss something through one or two playthroughs. You know, there's plenty of weapons and armors and various quirky things in the game that are just so weird. Like, you know, there's this guy. And you put on these boots, and they counteract the walking speed I mentioned earlier, but they also blind you. It's like an intentional fuck you to the player. These sorts of things make me feel like I'm in a world where magic is normal and logic is in a little bit of short supply, where I can encounter the impossible and the strange and go on with my day looking for Quama eggs. Putting these in might not have been hard, but things like the Scroll of Icarian Flight are incredible bits of environmental contextual storytelling alongside a pretty solid set of main quests and factions. Environmental storytelling is something Bethesda, even in its worst games, can do pretty well. Then there's some of the small touches. If you steal armor from a dead Vivic guard, the others get pissed and have unique dialogue. Joining some factions lock you out of others. There's little pieces of the game that will make you curse and swear up and down if you didn't know before playing. And you'll get annoyed that no one even told you. But all of this comes together to create a world that feels like the people in it existed before you do. Where the world never really feels like it was crafted for me, but that it exists and that I'm given a glimpse into it. The knowledge and understanding and ability to get the world is out there, but I need to work for it. And if I only want to know the vital stuff, I can. But going only for what's important would be missing out on so much more. It's an entire setting, and I feel strongly like I should be exploring it in books and conversations and delving into ruins, not just going to find the next fight. I've only played the last 3 Elder Scrolls games, but of those 3, the one that felt most like a proper world to me was Morrowind. Cyrodiil can feel a little cookie cutter at times, while with it being the metropolitan city, it doesn't really have a distinctive feature beyond Neo-Roman and medieval architecture. And Skyrim, I've done a whole damn video on that. Neither of these games are bad, but I just can't escape the feeling that Morrowind has a firmer grasp on its own internal identity. I feel that's in part because it doesn't much explain things to the player. You have to seek the knowledge out for yourself. I'm probably biased from nostalgia. Maybe the sheer amount of reading melted my brain, but at the end of the day, my opinion is just Morrowind feels more like it has a grasp on itself. I load up Morrowind, I get lost in its world, and it's not just because it's kind of a fun game, but because the world itself has so much to offer. Even just a walking sim style of play where I go from place to place can be gratifying if I'm in the right mood. There's not much to say beyond I love Morrowind, and I love feeling like I'm a stranger in a strange land. Thank you for watching. This video did actually take me a month to make, mostly because I actually have real life stuff that I'm up to, but also because this was a topic that took a lot to separate my feelings from. I really do appreciate that you took the time to watch it, and the names scrolling by right now are my patrons, who are extremely cool and very good people, who've decided to financially support my endeavors, whatever those happen to be. There'll be a link in the description, along with all the music I've used in this video. And before you go, do all that YouTube stuff that I feel so awkward asking people to do. I think you know what it is. But beyond that, have a good day.